I'm Ryan Grove. This is my wife, Tiffany Grove. We've been having a long conversation about the flat earth. I believe in the flat earth. She does not. So, without further ado, my dear.
Okay, so yesterday you asked me why is the sky blue, and I'm actually ashamed now because that was one of the first lessons my biology teacher taught us in college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but
Usually no one has come across it at all in their traditional education experience, so that's really remarkable.
I lucked out because my biology teacher was the end of like the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s
but
generation.
This was at college, though, so it
Yeah.
wasn't even like it took you to college to meet somebody like this.
Yeah. Well,
That's just how not common it is in the
he always gave
school
really
system.
great lectures. Like he taught us, oh, the one thing you'll never forget your whole life is what a bar body is. And he said, I've met students 10 years after they took my class, and I say, what's a bar body? So he set us up for that one. But a bar body is a tightly coiled, deeply staining, non-functioning X chromosome, and it's actually one of the only, it's in your epithelial cells, and it's actually one of the only chromosomes in your body that will distinguish whether you're male or female.
Wow.
Yeah. So he taught us that too.
Oh yeah, well the longest word in the dictionary is pneumona ultramicroscopic silicovolcaniconiosis.
I don't think it is anymore though. I think there's a new word that's replaced that.
Alright, sorry, go ahead.
But so why is the sky blue? Blue light is scattered in all directions by the tiny molecules of air in Earth's atmosphere. Blue is scattered more than other colors because it travels as shorter, smaller waves. This is why we see a blue sky most of the time. Closer to the horizon, the sky fades to a lighter blue or white. And you mentioned a prism yesterday, and actually this gives the illustration of a prism, and we also know about Roy G. Biv, and that's why in the light spectrum it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So that's why the sky is blue. And then
And it has the indigo and the violet through the pyramid from a perpendicular light source that has it at the bottom, presumably indicating that that's what's happening with the atmosphere. And so the indigo and the blue spectrum of light that's being diffracted or whatever is closest to us. Is that what that diagram means, sort of basically? Just so they know what we're talking about.
well, blue also has the shorter, yeah, so it is diffracted and
From a perpendicular light
Yeah.
source in that model, okay.
and argon is colorless, and a thick enough layer of colorless gas looks blue because it scatters shorter wavelengths more efficiently.
But you can put argon in a tube,
Right.
and put an electric current
But
through it, and it will actually glow blue.
They actually use it for fluorescent lighting though, so it's not really a true blue, but
Right, but
if
that's an
you
experiment that I
concentrated
saw.
it enough, then I'm
Yeah.
sure it would be.
Okay,
And
go on though. This is interesting.
also, if you understand that nitrogen is present in the atmosphere, but it still doesn't affect the color of the sky. Well,
maybe
it's colorless.
not.
Also,
Maybe it's
but-
not dense as say the argon is in that particular layer of the atmosphere, because
well, it doesn't matter.
nitrogen is competing with a lot of other elements in our
Significant cloud of
atmosphere,
like gas will
but they're
cause
pretty.
the prism of light to spread out that way into the more final shade of blue.
But if it is
Because the
excited,
light from the sun is just white, and it has all colors.
but if you also have to also agree that if you, like I just said before, that if you put argon in a tube and you put an electrical current through it, it will also glow blue.
Well, it's
So-
more like a fluorescent type of blue.
Well, I assume it depends on how concentrated.
But
The,
it's not that concentrated
the
in the sky.
argon is.
It's 9%.
But once we get above the ozone layer, that starts to change a little bit. Like I said last night, the noble gases actually have significant layers, and they layer themselves based on the atomic weight, on their atomic weight. But so I mean, that may be true, but if what I'm saying is also true, then I mean what I'm saying is these things don't negate each other though by any sense, but they're both actual very real possibilities.
And the ocean is blue because water absorbs color in the red part of the light spectrum like a filter. This leaves behind colors in the blue part of the light spectrum for us to see. The ocean may also take on green, red, or other hues as light bounces off of floating sediments and particles in the water.
That actually sounds super legit.
That's
so
like,
maybe it's not just reflecting the blue of the sky. Maybe that's actually what's happening.
Again, with the story of Ulysses, when he's crossing
good.
the Mediterranean Sea, Homer, often says, the sea is green or red or lots of other colors. But he never calls it blue. But
yeah, I like that.
And then why do stars twinkle? It's because their light must pass through pockets of Earth's atmosphere that vary in temperature and density. And it's all very turbulent. On rough nights, a star appears to shift positions constantly as its light is refracted this way and that. Which we've seen light refraction, and we could see how that would work if...
Okay, well then, if the moon is outside the atmosphere, according to your model, so why wouldn't we see the pockets of it doing the same thing as reflections of its light came through the atmosphere in the very same way that the starlight does? Why don't we see that, like some twinkling going on spots of the moon as it reflects light back to us?
Well, the moon's a lot closer.
But it's still outside the atmosphere, so the light still has to pass through the same atmospheric conditions that the starlight's passing through. Right?
Well, I think it's because it's very small, and also the stars, like I said, are much, much, much further out.
Yeah, but
so there's a lot more.
But what's making this
refraction.
phenomenon happen is that the light is passing through the atmosphere with little pockets that you just described. And I'm saying it doesn't matter if the light came from 2 billion light years away or it came from just right outside the atmosphere. It's still passing through those same pockets. So you would expect there to be a similar reaction, like twinkling, at least in little parts of the moon as we see it up in the sky. Something to think about.
Well, the way the moon works, it does have like a penumbra and stuff like that.
Just a twinkling. But anyway, something to think about.
Like I said, it's a lot closer.
Look, you can't. No one, and especially in this day and age, can prove anything, because everything can be proved. I could, in my own limited presentation, prove the Earth is flat, and you could prove that it's a globe and the heliocentric model is real and all that stuff. But just because you can prove something doesn't really actually mean that it's true. So when I react to something that you've talked about, I'm not necessarily like challenging it. I'm just giving an adjacent idea to think about alongside of it. Because maybe as we consider this or pieces of this and pieces of that maybe, we might glean something useful out of it. All right, but go on. I know you have more information that you'd like to share.
No, I just wanted to answer some of that from yesterday.
I know, I'm glad you did. That's so astute of you.
So, what did you have? Any other?
I don't know. Maybe we could think about the question why again. Like, why lie about the shape of the Earth? And I talked about Dogtooth, that great movie, the other night. Talked and mentioned how, like, if you lie about everything, the nature of everything, that is a really great foundation for a whole control paradigm, that as the government or the powers that be gradually begin to get control of all public aspects of our reality, like education systems and civil works and et cetera, that because of that initial foundation of incorrectness and lies has been laid, that as you proceed, you can fill in all the details of reality for us and make them seem like they make a lot of sense and they're logical and therefore they must be true. So that's initially one of the reasons. But another reason is something a little less politically philosophical than that, or conspiracy theory, is, remember when I said Admiral Richard Byrd said he found a landmass the size of the United States? He went on public television in like 58 or 59. Remember this?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, how can you fit that on Antarctica? And if you could, why couldn't you see its coasts more visibly from the coast, rather than have this barrier of desolate expanse that has been a real impediment for explorers to get to the interior? I mean, why? I mean, because if you look at a globe, you look at the United States, you look at Antarctica, even if it could kind of fit on there, you think that it would push to the edges, and so this country would be more perceptible from the edges, and maybe would have been discovered before the century. Maybe other people have other countries or cultures, whatever, have discovered it in the past, like the Vikings in America or the Chinese in America or something. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So if you have this landmass, then if you create a world reality that excludes its possibility, like the land, when I say landmass, obviously Antarctica's landmass, but what I'm talking about is Richard Byrd. Like if the one that he discovered and said had enough natural resources to fulfill the world's energy needs for generations to come, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If that is not part of what the whole entire world is taught, then they will never think that it exists. And so if I think of this, and then I think of this treasure actually being known and accessed by a few people on the world, and if for, I think we all know, judging by like how corrupt like economic entities are, and political entities, and we know that people at the top are corrupt. We just all know that, because to a degree it is very, very true. Because we know intimately that the systems that they exploit to benefit themselves are corrupt by the way that they impact us. So we would have to think in this theory, or this hypothesis of mine or theory, that the people that would actually have access to that place would be corrupt people in power with lots of privilege and access.
Neil Postman does say that technology creates an elitist class because of the natural divide between the haves and the have-nots. I'm obviously paraphrasing.
For sure. And we live in this time right now where, 100 years ago, I mean, there's people alive that grew up with like horses as transportation, still
Sure.
basically alive. And now we've come to this. So there's been an extreme classification socially that's taken place based on technology. The Western, what we call the Western world, and the Third world is a great example of that general classification, of that technocratical sociological development, for sure. But so let's say we tell everybody in the whole world that there's just this icy cap at the bottom of the globe, when actually there's this whole continent that we have access to. That for me to imagine that, immediately it makes me think of all the obvious like super advantages the people that had access to that that paradigm given to the rest of the world would provide them, for security, and no one's going to discover you if you can't possibly exist in their paradigm. This is not what I'm saying is the reason for the deception about the flat earth. I'm saying this is just another way to try to understand why.
What I heard about Antarctica is that the Knights of Ananurbi had the Piri Reis map, and that was supposedly created out of Turkey.
Right, from like
And
the
that
15th
it
century.
is actually a really good match
It's a great flat Earth map too.
for the possible Atlanta. It matches the
Atlantis,
map.
like
yeah.
the city that sunk?
Yeah, Atlantis.
From which.
It matches the map that Homer had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
When I read that Planet X book, that was an integral part of them setting up that whole theory.
And that possibly Hitler had a machine that generated a lot of heat because he was trying to melt the icebergs so that he could possibly find the technology, because he was a big believer in
A lot of
the
people have been
occult.
throughout history
He was
about
part of
the
he was a
Atlantis Antarctica thing.
He was a member of the Thule Society. He hobnobbed with Madame Blavatsky, and he was looking supposedly for the Holy Grail. Which, why not? If you have all the resources at your fingertips and it doesn't quite seem enough to conquer the world, then why wouldn't you look for some...
For sure,
I
absolutely.
mean, you get to that point and you're just out of your mind. Like Napoleon, you're out of your mind and you succeed for a while.
With the Antarctica bucket of weird things that have happened, let me preface with this. Remember the other night we talked about Admiral Richard Byrd, and when he died, his son came out with the publication of his journal, which was that ridiculous science fiction story about the hollow Earth at the North. And they did that right after he had passed away, which happened right after he went on TV and talked about this landmass. And then, he's no longer does he have stamps with his face on them. He's taken out of history books. And I told you, like, my parents' generation, everybody knows who he was because he was one of the most famous men on the whole planet up until 1960 or so. Mm-hmm. And so what I think is that was a bit of misinformation encouraged by his son to publish this nonsense to be something that would discredit him when he talked about Operation what's the Operation High Jump?
High Jump.
Operation High Jump. Now that is a real expedition because 5,000 Navy men.
Hey, that's
and
documented
aircraft carriers. It's totally happened, right? It's not like that nonsense about the hollow Earth, whatever, which is misinformation to discredit Richard Byrd.
But to be fair,
but they had a third of their fleet messed up by something that kicked their butts.
Right. But to be fair, maybe Richard Byrd did find one of those natural areas where there's like an underground region that's kind of oasis-y, with water and some flora and fauna.
He mentioned that he had found all kinds of, like, we have like minus 80 degree weather, and suddenly there's this pocket with vegetation and water because of the geothermal.
Sure. And the other thing is there's a lot of underground tunnels under the continents.
Oh yeah.
Remember there was a submarine that disappeared,
like under canvas after going underneath in California. It made it all the way to Kansas.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's some interesting reading for sure. So I guess I would mention that it says here that stars twinkle because their light has to squeeze through several different layers of the Earth's atmosphere.
I forgot about
that. But if you do look at a moon through a telescope, you will see the little craters wiggle a little about it. But, I don't know. I'll try to look into that and see why it doesn't twinkle.
All right.
I mean, it's a lot bigger and more distinct and clear than the stars, though. The stars are very far away. They're burning balls of gas, where the moon is actually like a rock that's just reflecting the light of the
But light is light, and it has to pass through the atmosphere to get to our eyes.
But the farther away, I mean, that makes sense. Everyone knows that. If you're underwater, and there's a flashlight, you can see it pretty clear at the top, but the further down you get, the more wiggly it looks.
because the
and indistinct.
the density of the water
Yeah.
affects. However, when we stand just outside on a night, whatever the conditions are of the atmosphere and stuff, if we can see a star light and we can see the moon, both of the lights coming through the atmosphere, that we should, if these lights have to sparkle and whatever because of this
Twinkle.
yes, because of why you say, then the moonlight, or at least some of it, should do the same. And I know I've already said that at the beginning, but I'm just
also,
reiterating.
to be fair, the moon is not generating its own light, but the stars are. So that would be a
Ooh.
difference too. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe next time we got something to talk about, because
Oh.
that's kind of debatable too. And that's a super interesting topic. And I think we're going to end it here for tonight. And we'll be back.